What it do, US history kids? This is the first review video that I'm making for US history this year. Super exciting. One thing that is not good is that this looks like crap. But because of West Ada's restrictive proprietary software, I have to do the web version of whatever documents I'm doing because it won't cast or screencast my uh, desktop. Okay, that out of the way, let's kind of do an overview for review of Unit 5. And then later on, we'll probably maybe get into some of the more specifics or things that you have questions on. But this right here, the unit cover sheet that I gave you way back at the beginning, this is like the gold standard that we want to be using to study with to make sure that you understand these things. The first thing is I put on here for you the like the major events that you really need to know from this time period in the order in which they happen because I know what am I doing? Because I know sometimes that can get a little bit tricky to keep all those straight. So we're gonna basically be starting. Technically, Hawaii happens before the USS Maine, but this time period really kicks off with the explosion of the USS Maine, and then a few months later, the U.S. enters the Spanish-American War, kind of beginning the era that we refer to as imperialism. So this is going to be like our first big event that occurs. There's going to be a number of events that follow that also represent imperialism in various different ways. You've got big stick diplomacy, which is really focusing on imperialism for military reasons and demonstrating military power. You've got dollar diplomacy, which is going to focus more on economic motivations and how the US can spread trade and economic influence and investment over the world. And then moral diplomacy, which doesn't show up too often, but the idea that we're supposed to kind of be expressing or spreading American ideals, democratic values, and what have you. So you've got 1901 is when Roosevelt becomes president, and you see the beginning of extension into Cuba, and then Panama, the Panama Canal, and then kind of rounds out with the Roosevelt Corollary, which we looked at in class, which is this idea that the U.S. is now going to be this like global policeman across the world or across the Western Hemisphere, and it's kind of this extension of the Monroe Doctrine, where Europe now stays out of U.S. affairs completely, and the U.S. is going to be in Central America as much as possible. Hello, Nathan Wilson. Anyway, Taft kind of is known for dollar diplomacy, even though you could really think of any economic uh, reason for imperialism as being dollar diplomacy, but he's the one that kind of coins the term. And then in 1914, we kind of separate off this section of the unit from the rest because in 1914, World War One breaks out in Europe, and Woodrow Wilson becomes president, and then you've got the U.S. entering World War One kind of near the end. The Espionage and Sedition Acts, which we'll talk about during the effects, domestic impact of the war, and then finally the Treaty of Versailles, which ends World War One. So that's kind of the unit in a nutshell. Those are like the major big events that you need to know. Um, and then, okay, hang on a second. So then I kind of break it up by objective here, and if you can answer these using the terms, like you have like topic sentences, and you can say like I can talk about this in a couple of sentences and give a specific example, then you will be in really good shape. So the significant events, I'll probably warrants another video, but we kind of broke it down into what we see overall in Central and Latin America, and then what we see overall in Asia and the Pacific. So I kind of defined some things there. I would highly suggest when you're doing the cover sheet, doing what is an economic motivation, what is a political moral motivation, and what is a cultural moral motivation. So what I did is I said, here's the summary of economic. It means that the US should imperialize to open access to new markets and improve the economy. And then I have a couple examples. So the open door notes in China, trying to gain access to Chinese markets, is an example of economic motivation. Henry Cabot Lodge was one of the people that you learned about in the imperialism events, like trading card game activity that we did. Uh, oh, we're gonna end in 30 seconds. Okay, they really want to upgrade. So I'm going to stop pretty soon here, but I would go through and do these ones as well. What's an example for military? What's an example for culture? And I will see you around with something a little more in depth later.